And welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Still Curtain podcast. I'm your host, Tommy Jaggi, editor of StillCurtain.com. And joining me, as always, is Shayne Kubas, contributor for Still Curtain. Shayne and I ranted yesterday on the curtain call about the Steelers versus Texans game. We're going to talk about that a little bit to start the show today. We're going to give our Steelers versus Ravens preview for Week 5 and share our predictions for that game coming up here on Sunday. We're also going to talk about some of the latest Kenny Pickett rumors and the changes that the Steelers must make, like starting today. So let's jump right into this, Shayne. Let's talk about some of the trending stuff this week, and we'll rehash that Steelers versus Texans game, as reluctant as we are to do that, because we just want to wipe that clean from our memory. I mean, Steelers 30-6 blowout loss. They played worse, in my opinion, Shayne, than they did in Week 1, where they were caught completely off guard against a much more talented team in the San Francisco 49ers. This was ugly. It was bad from the beginning. It didn't get much better, and nobody showed up to play. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, if you guys haven't seen it, definitely go watch the curtain call on the channel as well. And, the same channel you guys are watching it live on right now. We rehashed, I shouldn't say rehashed, but we went over everything that you could really go over as far as the negatives and all the stuff that happened. But basically, this was one of the worst losses of the Tomlin era, honestly, in my opinion, just because of when you factor in everything, coming off of 2 straight wins to be technically first in the division, you're going on the road, granted, but to play a rookie quarterback, one who had played very well and then also played well against us, but still, you're playing a rookie quarterback. You have a lot of pride in your defense, and your offense not only doesn't show up, but your defense doesn't show up either, right? Like, nobody really showed up in that game overall. They had a great game plan against what is really a very easy to target secondary right now, and that's really what did us in. And it was really difficult to watch in general.
It was horrible. I mean, it was offensive, defensive, play by play throughout the game. Like, there were very, very few things to be encouraged by. And when you go back and watch it again, and you go watch it on the All 22, Shayne, it's as discouraging, if not more so, when you see it the second, third time through. And so it's one of those games where I can't believe that the Steelers are playing this level of football a month into the season. That was their first game in October. That was the first day of October. It's got to get better than this. Obviously, we know that they have no chance if things continue this way. Would you drop some winners and losers for us? I say winners tentatively here, because was anybody really a winner, Shayne?
I mean, if we start with winners, I thought Najee Harris played very well. I thought he ran the ball really hard.
The name, yeah.
I really thought he really showed all the things that you'd like to see from him at this point in his career, and what we've been hoping to see. And so far, the worst part about this, I think, for me, as far as the offense goes, is Najee's played his best of his career so far on an individual basis. And you could argue this line is worse than it's ever been in terms of how it's played so far to start the year. And he's still managed to lead the league in explosive runs through 4 weeks and things like that. And it's just it's really discouraging to see him finally kind of come into his own, I think, as a player, understand who he is, and start making more plays. And it doesn't matter, like, at all. Yeah. And it kind of, unfortunately, even though I've never been one to really, I critique picks of the running backs in the first round in general most of the time, and I do so with the Steelers to a certain degree as well with him. But again, it's really not because of what I think about the player, especially the version that we're getting of him right now. It's that when a guy is playing as well as he is, especially in this game with the limited touches he had, it just doesn't matter sometimes, right? Like, if everything else is bad. And granted, with Canada, whoever we would have taken probably wouldn't have made much of a difference either. So I guess it doesn't, matter too much, but that's also just more discouraging, right? Like, even if the players play well, it really doesn't mean a whole lot for this offense right now.
Yeah, I think that you're right. I mean, he's really the one name. Maybe you can highlight too. I mean, I think going back and watching that offensive line, I think that Isaac Seumalo probably played his best game.
He had a good day in pass block, especially
he was much better than he has been in previous weeks. Like, he was terrible in that opening game, and so you like to see that. At the same time, though, didn't really matter because the collection of the group still stinks. And so, but you're right with Najee. I mean, I agree. I think he's playing his best football. I mean, I'm shocked that he's one of the highest in explosive run rates. Like, something I would have never guessed.
Yeah.
Having said that, though, you and I kind of always talk about the value of the running back position, and though it might not be his fault this year,
It's not, no.
even his quality performance in this game, it did not move the needle one way or the other, because Steelers still can't score points. I mean, that's on the coordinator, it's on the quarterback, it's on the offensive line. There's a lot of factors that go into play here, but he's really the name or two that I would mention from here. And Shayne, I think there's an issue. I think there's a major issue when your entire team does not show up to play. I have to point the finger at the coaching at that point, because I can't believe that you can get like an invisible TJ Watt and Minkah Fitzpatrick and guys who are routinely good and usually dominant, and it didn't even look like they got off the plane. And so that's the biggest issue I have with the Steelers and their performance against the Texans in week 4. When you're looking at like everybody, and you can really only point out like one or two guys maybe that were at least decent in this game, that's a big issue. And I feel like it stems farther beyond, because we know these players are more talented than that. The Steelers don't have a 49ers roster. They're not the Dallas Cowboys. They're nothing like that. They don't compare with those teams, but we should be able to see them compete with a young, banged up Houston Texans team. And we couldn't even see that.
Well, I think the thing that really is discouraging, and we've talked about this before, and I understand TJ and Alex, they have their specific alignments. They play at in certain places on the field. But the Texans know that, and they were able to keep them from impacting the game because, Alex was winning most of his reps, but it didn't matter because they threw the ball too quickly for him to affect it. With TJ, they were throwing all sorts of different guys at him. I think 5 or 6 guys probably blocked him at one point in the game, despite the fact he was always lined up on the same side. Like, they did everything right to prevent them from winning the game, and that's kind of the issue with this team right now. We've talked about it a bunch, and I was just on a show the other night with actual Ravens people too for that PSF app, about Tommy, where they were asking like, how can the Steelers beat the Ravens? We're going to talk more about that later. And I said the same thing I'm going to say probably every game until further notice, is the pass rush has to win it, because that's the only part of this team that when they aren't blocked up and whenever the other team can't prevent them from getting to the quarterback is an above average or even, in our case, elite unit on this team right now. Everything else has so many issues that they are the only ones that really have a chance to affect the game most times. And the Texans knew that. And even with the banged up offensive line, if they're going to line those two up all the time at the same places, you can do things to prevent them from impacting the game in ways that you can't with other defenses that do move their guys around or do try to put them in positions. Like, what if you stood up TJ in the A gap in this game and asked Kendrick Green and I don't even remember who their center is for this game, ask them to figure it out. Like, ask them to not let him in immediately. Whatever, Highsmith, whoever, bring Herbig in and let him just blitz from linebacker, whatever. None of that happened because they don't do that stuff, right? And that's what ultimately led to this defense being picked apart, because the secondary can't hold up right now. Just straight up cannot do so.
Yeah, and I kind of been stressing that the last couple of weeks here, Shayne, that you need more creativity on defense. We're going to talk about that in a little bit here. In terms of losers, Shayne, obviously there's too many to delve into in one episode of this here. There truly is. And so the one thing I will say, that I'm so disappointed. Now, I know that Stroud is off to a good start. I think he looks very, very Dak-like, just cool, calm, collected, poise in the pocket, out in rhythm. And I know that they've got some talented young receivers. At the same time, you just let Nico Collins chew you up for 168 yards on 9 targets. And I'm so disappointed with these starting cornerbacks in Levi Wallace and Patrick Peterson. I think they've both been terrible this year. And the Steelers need the changes in the issues, or the issues stem far beyond that. And we need a lot of changes on this team. But that is one that I definitely wanted to point out. Is there anything specifically that just irked you in week 4?
I mean, we're going to talk about it here when we talk about how they can turn things around here in our next segment, but there's just so many players that need to see the field more in general, right? Like guys who are not performing, who need to step back and let some other guys play. And I'll save most of that conversation for them. But I mean, you just look at this team, the snap counts, like, why is Joey Porter Jr. not playing 50, 60 snaps at this point? Why is Keanu Benton not playing 40, 50 snaps as the leader in the defensive line? Like, why are these rookies who are outperforming the veterans when they get a chance? What more do they have to show to get out there more than these guys? Like, I don't know how much longer Tomlin wants to, like, I don't know if he's just a masochist all of a sudden or something. Like, what's he, like, I don't know what the deal is with letting these guys just get beat every play and then not letting the guys who haven't had a chance to, full-time role, go out there and try to do better. I don't know what else has to happen.
Oh yeah, I mean that's completely understandable. I think we all share that thought at this point. If you weren't thinking that by the beginning of the season, I bet you're thinking it now.
Yeah.
So we will talk about that in just a minute here. All right, let's get to some of the news around the Steelers organization this week. Pat Freiermuth, we got an injury update on him. It is a hamstring that he will be week to week with, is what the designation is, according to Ian Rappaport of NFL Network. That's never encouraging. You like to see, if anything, day to day, maybe, but with these soft tissue injuries, they can be really tricky, Shane. And we've already seen Deontay land on IR with a hamstring injury. So I wouldn't be shocked. Like if he were to go out there and find he can't do it or has a setback, he might be heading for the same path, maybe the 4-week IR stint and then coming back to the field. I've just been disappointed so much by the misuse of Freiermuth, and we'll talk about that here in a second as well, because I know that he's a better player than how he's been performing, and I know that he's not being utilized correctly. And this is a big setback for him because Freiermuth has a contract coming up. I mean, the Steelers would typically, this coming off season would be the time that they would award their player going into the final year of their deal. And considering that Freiermuth has been a top 5-ish, 7-ish tight end the past 2 years, you would think he would get that deal. Now, I don't know what that looks like for him, Shane. I mean, he's got 53 yards on 13 targets through 4 games. I mean, that's a really bad ratio. It's horrible, yards per target. And it's not something I would have guessed, because last year, I believe, if that held true throughout the season, I know he got injured with concussion then at the very last game. He was at one point, I know, late in the season, next to only Travis Kelce in terms of his PFF grade, but also in terms of 75-yard receiving games. And so he hasn't come close to touching that this year.
Yeah. I mean, first the injury, like I would assume we see him as early as week 7, because that would give him 2 full weeks to recover. And then you see what happens from there. I think the fact that I was hearing 2 weeks makes me think it's probably not as bad of a hamstring pull as what Deontay had, obviously. So you hope that they can both maybe return in week 7, which should be huge, to just give some more answers possibly offensively. But like you said, like at this point, it's not really a loss because they refuse to use him, right? Like Canada just isn't using him in the way that even he was the past 2 years. And that's the frustrating thing, is like, we could talk all day about all the things that Canada doesn't do well, but Pat was getting the ball like good enough. Like we wanted even more, but like he was at least a big part of the passing game last year. And it feels like this year he just doesn't know he's on the team. Like, I don't know. He's using him more as a down blocker, which is not his strength whatsoever. He's not playing him in the slot nearly as much. Like, I just don't know what the point of this is. Like, if you have an established player like him, you should be leaning on him in moments where you don't have Deontay Johnson, right? Like where you have to go to a Calvin Austin who has played well when given the opportunity, but doesn't have the volume of targets that, Johnson's used to. Like, somebody has to soak up these targets. And right now no one is, because even Pickens, like, he was getting so much attention in this past game. Just there's nowhere to put the football a lot of the time. And it's because half the time Pat's not even, if he is going out for a route, it's nothing really worth throwing to. Like, I don't get it.
Yeah, I mean, the game plan is so poor. I mean, last year I think he was second in yards per route run among all NFL tight ends.
Yeah.
And now he's hardly even playing from the slot, and you're trying to use him as essentially that inline blocker, that down blocker, and he's just getting washed out. That's not his game. As much as you would want him to be Heath Miller, that is not the type of player he is. He is a legitimate F tight end, that move tight end who should be lined up from the slot almost all the time.
Yeah.
And the guy that can run quality routes and do some stuff after the catch and catch the ball in traffic. You are not using him that way. You're not using him over the middle of the field in these slants and posts. And when they do get them the ball, Shane, it seems like it's on a screen pass that goes nowhere because the Steelers are terrible at setting up screens. So just a complete misuse. And we'll talk about that here in a second as well. Some of the other players that are being misused. In corresponding moves to that, the Steelers, they signed Rodney Williams to their active roster, and they signed Noah Gindorf to their practice squad to fill his place. Kenny Pickett injury update. You probably heard by this point in the week as we're recording this, it is a bone bruise and a knee strain for Pickett, which is excellent news considering the alternative. I don't think anybody suspected like an ACL when it happened, but there were some that saying maybe MCL tear, MCL sprain, or a meniscus tear potentially. And thankfully, it's none of those things. I think those situations would have probably landed him on IR designation to return. And now, from the latest rumor, and this is from Andrew Filipponi, put this out here today, Pickett is rumored to be playing this Sunday, that he's going to suit up and play. I don't know if I'm buying that yet, Shayne.
Yeah.
But the circumstances could call for it depending on how you look at it. I mean, if you think the Steelers are going to march out there and get their butts handed to them by the Ravens anyway, then you probably are best to rest him. But at the same time, this is a huge divisional game coming up here. You can actually be in first place in the AFC North as badly as you've played all season long so far. You can be in first place in the AFC North. It'll be a 2-game swing the other way if the Ravens end up winning that. But do you jeopardize putting Kenny Pickett out there if he's got a bone bruise, if he's not the same? Obviously, different injury, but we've seen how terribly Joe Burrow has performed with that calf strain. He's just not the same player. He doesn't have the same comfort. He can't move around as well. And so he's been awful to begin the year. And so it makes you wonder what the best circumstances here. I know that Brooke Pryor of ESPN reported that Pickett is expected to practice today and this week. And so we'll see how much he gets on the field and what his responsibility will be there. But it's interesting to note that there are rumors already swirling that he could play Sunday.
I think the key thing here is if he can practice fully and he isn't going to be limited by it mobility wise. Like if the pain tolerance is the only thing, if like he's able to move like he normally would, he gives them a better chance, even with the way the offense is playing and with the way he's playing. He gives them a better chance to beat the Ravens and Trubisky. I'm sorry. The last time we saw Trubisky play the Ravens, guess what? He threw 3 picks, right? Like this is just that he's not going to be able to do much against this Ravens defense, and probably we won't either anyway. But if he's healthy enough to play, unlike a Burrow where like you could tell like he's healthy enough to play technically, but he's only healthy enough to play badly, which is just weird to me that they keep doing that with him. I think if the Bengals lose, this next game, I think that he shuts down for a while. But like either way, I think the problem with it is, can he do that, right? Like, is he as mobile? Because that's the key thing. If he's not mobile, then there's no point, because Trubisky's a mobile quarterback himself. He just isn't as good of one, right? And that's the thing, is like if you're at least getting that mobility, where the Ravens are going to be bringing a ton of pressure regardless. I really feel like I think that they know that right now this offense can't handle any blocking assignments whatsoever. So if they can confuse them and get some free rushers, like they're going to be doing that. So if you can't move out of the pocket, if you can't escape the pocket the way that he wants to anyway, yeah, it's probably better to sit him. So I think practice is really going to be what determines this. I don't think they're going to throw him out there if he's not, if he's hobbled or if he's not able to run the way that they want him to. So we'll have to see how his practices go, honestly.
And I completely agree with you, Shayne. If he's ready to go, he is your guy. There's no going
you have
back.
to play him. Yeah, you have to.
And I don't care what the Mitch Trubisky or Mason Rudolph apologists say at this point. We've seen Trubisky's in year 7. Rudolph is in year 6. We've seen enough of these guys to know who they are at this point. They are not changing in the back half of their career. They are the player that they are at this point. Pickett, even if you were convinced you already know who he is,
right?
We got to give him a little bit of grace here, because he has started the equivalent of 1 NFL season so far, dating back to his rookie year last year. And even if you think there's only a 5% or 10% chance he's going to be that guy, at least there's a chance, Shayne. Yes. At least there's a chance. There is no chance with the other guys. No. They're not going to be a long-term answer. So he needs to play. He needs to stay on the field. He needs to turn it around if he's ready to go this week. If he's not, then I agree 100%. Shut him down, give him the extra week off of rest, because it kind of does line up a little bit nice because of the injuries that Steelers have experienced, where you can get Deontay back, you can get Pickett back, you can kind of hit the reset button, and then you got a long stretch after the bye where you've got to play some good football. I just don't feel I don't feel confident either way. First of all, because the Ravens are playing like a really good team right now, and the Steelers are not so much. But I do think that if Pickett if he can manage the pain and he's not susceptible to re-injuring himself because it's just a bruise essentially, then I want to see him out there on the field. All right, we are going to shift gears and we are going to talk about changes Steelers must make. If you are joining us here in the live chat, please ask your questions. Just type them right in there, and Shayne and I would love to get to those for you. We are here every single Wednesday at 1:30 p.m. live, so make sure that you mark that down on your calendar so you can join us. All right, Shayne. Changes the Steelers must make entering week 5. And this kind of goes for the rest of the season. And it's some of the things that we've talked about as early as week 1. How can they turn things around this year? Well, Shayne, we started talking about a little bit already, just the gross misuse of players on the roster.
Yeah.
Like, to me, Shayne, it feels like Mike Tomlin and Matt Canada and Terrell Austin have a hard time identifying what their players are actually good at. And I'll give you a piece of evidence for this. We go back and we talked about this on the curtain call yesterday. What Mike Tomlin said in his press conference, right? The Steelers had the 4th and 1. Everybody's asking, why didn't you run the ball here? And his reasoning, Shayne, because we did not have Dan Moore Jr. and Pat Freiermuth. And like I said, I think that Daniel Moore Jr. might be the worst left tackle in the league so far this year. I think it's hard to make a case for somebody on his level down here. And I think that Pat Freiermuth has been horrendous as a blocker. As much as I like Pat, I think he's been terrible as a blocker this year. So if that is your reasoning, that you're not running the ball at a critical 4th and 1 where you were down 16-6, you got a chance to jump back into this game, and instead you go out of shotgun, you don't throw any play action or anything in there. You are running the ball because you don't have 2 bad blockers in there. Seems a little counterintuitive to me, especially considering you drafted Broderick Jones 14th overall, who is a better run blocker than pass protector at this point, and you drafted Darnell Washington, who is the best blocking tight end in the draft. I just don't get it. Are they having trouble recognizing the strengths of their own players, Shayne?
It sure seems like it, and I think especially with that particular play call, I've seen some people try to say like, oh well, he was saying that they couldn't go into true heavy personnel, 13 personnel, or because of that,
Which
or
you
they
don't
couldn't
need
do this.
to, like, run,
exactly.
spread, run out of spread.
You don't have to. Yeah, you can spread it out. You've been better running in that situation anyway, for the most part this year, when you've running out of the spread formations. As much as they bother me sometimes, it has been more effective than not. You can do that. You could get under center with Kenny, and at least if you are going to try to throw the ball, at least you could do it off of a play action fake to get the defense to come up a little bit to give him an easier read for a first down. It's just everything about that play call. It was a microcosm of their issues. They didn't call a play that was clearly available to them that they could have done. They didn't lean on the strengths of the players that were playing well, Najee specifically. They didn't give Kenny an easy opportunity to do anything. And again, people were saying like, oh, well, Kenny ran himself into a sack and then there's guys open. I'm like, all that's great. That's true. If that's true. And I did go back and watch it. And yeah, there's opportunities to make plays. He hasn't been making them this year. So why are we going to that and we must have it down? It's the same thing that you look at Justin Fields prior to this past week, where they're trying to get him to do stuff that hasn't been going well or that he has not been able to do. And they're acting like they're surprised that they're not winning or they're not playing well. Like, obviously you want to develop them and you want to give Kenny a chance to make those big plays. But if it's 4th and 1, I'm going to whatever I think is the best opportunity to get a first down. I don't care about the development of the player in the moment. I don't care about giving him a chance to prove himself in that moment. You're trying to win football games right now, especially on the road against a team that you should beat, right? Like, that's the ultimate goal in the situation. And the fact that they went to that particular play call and the reasoning for it tells me that this staff right now does not have a good understanding of the strengths of their players, especially talking about Dan Moore being out. Good. He shouldn't be in the game in this situation. If anything, they should have taken him out even if he wasn't hurt for this play in particular. Yeah. Like, if that you can make a better argument for that than you could making an argument for them not running the ball because he's out. Like, that's just where we're at right now with this team, and I don't really understand what the divide is. Like, what is the blinders being put up to not let these coaches understand these things?
Yeah, and that's just one example of it too, Shayne. Like, you can look back from the first drive of the first game of the year and all the way through now and see the players in the misuse of everybody so far. Like, I look at a guy like Calvin Austin.
Yeah.
Like, a guy like, why are you not getting this ball? Why are you not getting Calvin Austin the ball in space, drag routes, slants? Like, try to get him involved. They're using him on these comeback routes on the sideline for 5'7" and 7/8 receiver, and they're acting like that's where he wins. I mean, there hasn't been the go balls to George Pickens, and I know that I wasn't a big fan of just the YOLO ball on 3rd down last year, but use it sometimes. I mean, that's how he wins. Like, that is his route, and that's what
give
he
him
does
an
best.
opportunity. Yeah.
Exactly. We talked about Pat Freiermuth already coming down as an inline blocker when he's just not good there at all. He needs to be involved in the receiving game. I think that he was bordering on Pro Bowl level this past year, especially with his play, and it just dropped drastically, and his efficiency has been cut in half. And then you look at the defensive side of the ball, a player like Keanu Benton. Like, if we can sit at home from our couches, Shayne, and be able to see, with Cam Hayward out, Keanu Benton is clearly the best interior defender. I mean, there's not really a close second right now. And the fact that we can see that, yes, you are probably one of the better players on the team overall right now, despite just turning 22 years old and this being your rookie season. I do not care how old you are or how much inexperience you have. If you are the best player and we can recognize that, get on the field. The same can be said with Porter over Levi Wallace, who has just been an absolute train wreck so far. And we look at Porter. Porter's got 58 snaps on the year, Shayne. 58 snaps on the year. It's not even equivalent to a single game for Levi Wallace in these first 4 games. So I just don't understand the discrepancy there between the guy that you drafted 32nd overall, who's the guy who's supposed to be this genuine outside boundary starting cornerback, between the guy that you paid pennies for in free agency 2 years ago and a guy who was kind of on the downward trend already and was not a good athlete to begin with. It's not surprising to witness the results because we knew the player. We recognize that. I feel like the coaching staff is doing a pretty poor job, if I had to say right now, about recognize the talent of their players.
And the frustrating thing is, like, I feel like if you were to ask Mike Tomlin and these coaches, like, what I would ask them specifically is, I'd be like, I want you to explain to me in as simple terms as possible, without bringing up whether they're a veteran or not, or their experience, why it is you continue to play these players over these particular players. Like, why are you playing Levi Wallace over Joey Porter Jr.? Why are you not playing Desmond King, for example, over some of the other guys that are? I understand he's new to the team. He's trying to get acclimated. It seems like at this point he should be. He's a veteran. I'm sure he can figure it out. Why is he not seeing the field more whenever these guys aren't covering anybody? Why is Patrick Peterson not playing in the slot more so that way some of these guys can get on the field? Because that's where I think he has a chance to stick for a little bit. Why are none of these things happening? Why did it take Dan Moore getting a knee injury to put Broderick Jones in whenever he's clearly already probably a better player than him overall, especially when you factor in the run game? Like, why is it taking so long for all of these things? And I don't think they could give me a reason that is based in fact that doesn't involve saying that they're veterans, they're leaders, whatever else. And at this point, I don't care how veteran you are. I don't care how much leadership you may have. We're a bad football team. And you're part of why we are. At some point, the dam has to break, right? And I don't know if it's going to be this game. I hope it isn't, but we'll get into a little bit. Like, I think it could be. That's what I would be asking right now.
Yeah, I mean, and your veterans just got whipped by a bunch of young guys over in Houston this past week too. So what does it really matter? I mean, you have to play the more talented players, and I think that 95% of the fan base can recognize that, and the other group of fans are just the Steelers can do no wrong type. And so, and you know me, Shayne, I'm going to share my thoughts no matter what. I'm not going to go along just with what the Steelers do. If I think they're wrong in something, I will call it out. And I think that they are wrong for not playing their young guys earlier in the season and more often than what they have, because especially when everybody and their mother thought the Steelers just crushed this draft class too, right? You got
so far, have they proven wrong? Have we been like,
no, I mean, it's been a limited sample, but it's like, you should have 3 or 4 guys on here who could be contributors like right now in a full-time capacity essentially, and they're just not using him. And so that is frustrating. How else can the Steelers turn things around, Shayne? Well, I think a Matt Canada firing perhaps would have sufficed. I mean, it's something that has to happen at some point. We don't know if the Steelers, they're not the team that does this midseason, but maybe they will consider that this year with how bad things have been. 12 offensive points per game. The Steelers are a bottom 6 team essentially in every single measurable category that you can find. They're second to last in EPA, only behind the Giants, who have just been absolute train wreck as much as the Steelers have.
Yeah, they're a whole.
So, I mean, the Steelers are a bad football team. And you can look at raw stats, you can look at advanced stats, and offensive side of the ball, it's gone progressively worse since Matt Canada got here. And I just don't know how long you can stick with him, Shayne.
I think the sad part about it is, Tommy, is like, we can continue to come here every week and talk about how Matt Canada should be in the unemployment line, right? Like, we can keep talking about that. It won't save them. And that's the sad part, is it's not going to save the season. It won't save their offense this year. I think the damage he has done to the development of these players is kind of what it is. Like there's obviously potential to fix a lot of that. There's potential to be better than we are right now. But if we do fire him, which we should, again, there's no reason at this point for him to still be employed. It's not going to be all of a sudden like we're not going to go from 12 points to 25 points. Like we'll be a better offense by default because I think whoever would take over would be able to better situationally call plays, if nothing else. Like I think they'd be able to take the rather poor playbook and make the most of it compared to Canada. But it's going to be a slow grind to get better. Like this is not, especially this season, if we make a change, it's going to come next year is when you could see significant changes. And I want to see them do it just to prove to me like they can see what everyone else sees, right? Like it's really more not even about this season anymore. It's about, can you tell me that you understand what's going on? Like, can you prove to me that this is not just all of us having a mirage? Like what's going, like that's really my biggest thing with firing him at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it's like we said, it's something that had to happen during the past offseason. And when it didn't, Shayne, I was furious. And I went on a rant about it because I said, I think the Steelers season is going to be doomed before it started. And it's certainly looking that way. And I hate to be so right on some of those type of things, Shayne. I'm like, I want to think in the back of my mind, maybe there's a chance you can turn around, but I knew better. I mean, we saw 2-year sample size. We saw 34 games of Matt Canada prior to him being brought on for a third season. And there was nothing to justify that happening other than Tomlin's reasoning of, oh, well, you don't want to give Kenny Pickett another offensive coordinator.
Like I do, though. Actually, I really do.
Yes. Yes, but I do. That's the thing. I really do. And I've used this example before, but if you go look at like Tua Tagovailoa in Miami, he was on a similar track, not quite as bad as Pickett in his first 2 years, but a guy that you're already talking about. Hey, the Dolphins might need to move on. I mean, this guy's averaging 6.5 yards an attempt. They're not scoring. Maybe they can move him for a second round pick or something that way. And then you look at what Mike McDaniel does over there for Miami. This team scored 70 points and they arrested their starter in the fourth quarter the week before last. And I just, you can't even come to get yourself to believe that Canada can ever be even close to being on par with some of these offensive minds in the league that the Steelers can compete with those teams. And that's what's so frustrating, Shayne. So I think that it has to start with a change in philosophy for sure. And I think that you need to get out of the rut of thinking, yeah, we're going to play great defense and we're going to run the ball and we're going to win the 20-17 type game. And you can't do that in today's NFL. Offenses are too good. They're too explosive. The rules cater to the offense. You have to adjust to the times. That's my thought on that, Shayne.
Yeah, and I just want to touch on a couple of chats we have here from our buddy Andrew with Still Curtain as well. He's chiming in here about a couple things. The entire team doesn't make a lot of sense. Little to no game adjustments, same schemes on defense and offense that don't work. Big changes, quotes, coming, and we have an extra padded practice. Yeah, that's the type of stuff. And he also says, it's honestly
that was the big change. Yeah. Everybody was anticipating. Oh, we're going to practice harder.
It's like Matt Canada is an issue, but he's an over scapegoat at this point. Issues run deeper. I agree with that. As much as I think he is just as bad as we all say he is, but at this point, like I said, it doesn't matter. Like firing him would be just a step in the right direction. Is not the fix all of this team. Like the issues run so much deeper than that. And I think he's like the poster child of the problems because of how bad he is individually, and also because of what he represents as far as above and beyond loyalty to your people, despite them not deserving it. And that's, I think, why he gets so much of the blame and still justifiably so a lot of the time. But again, like how they turn things around, a lot of this is going to have to come probably next year. Like there's a lot of things they can do now to help the cause, but none of them are going to take them from this mid-tier team that they're becoming to a team that's actually truly like a playoff level team. Like that's not going to happen. I don't think. I just don't see that happening.
No, I think the problem with the way that the Steelers have been trying to assemble the roster in the past however many years now is essentially you are trying to get by with a roster that's good enough to win in the regular season.
Yes.
We can tell, I mean, if you know football, you can tell that it's not built for success in the playoffs. Like you can't win these type of games. You have to, you got to have a change in philosophy, and you have to have the mentality where I want to get a first down on every play. I want to score a touchdown on every drive. You should not be trying to say, I'm going to try to get in third and manageable. We're going to try to get ourselves in the red zone so that we can at least get a field goal out of this drive. Like, I think that they are so conservative that way on offense, and they put too much trust in their defense. And I know you got some stars on defense, but your defense can only do so much, and you can only keep a great offenses down for a little bit, kind of like we saw in the Steelers playoff game a few years back. As good as their defense played against the Chiefs early on and getting that defensive touchdown, I mean, the offense couldn't stay on the field. They got worn out, and then it ended up being just a blowout by the end of the game. And so that's what's going to happen. You get in there against Mahomes or Josh Allen or whoever it ends up being, the Miami's offense. I can't imagine how Steelers would match up against Miami's offense right now when everybody runs a 4-2 and the Steelers corners all run 4-6s. Like it would be a nightmare, Shayne.
Yeah, and something I want to touch on again with where we're at philosophy wise is the quote from Canada this past week about we're not built to come back.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Why not? How are we in what what do you mean by that? Like every team, there's no team that should say like, oh, we're not built to come back. Like you have to have a plan. You have to have a way to get there. And we have players that are explosive. It's not like we can't create explosive plays like it's impossible. I mean, like we said, like Najee has the most explosive runs in the league. Somehow, we don't really know how that's happening other than him just willing it to happen at this point, but like he's still doing it. Like we have 270+ yard touchdowns. I think that Pickett's still the only quarterback with 270+ yard touchdown passes this year. So how are we not built to come back? Like what does that mean? Like you don't have a plan to come back, or that you don't trust the players to be able to come back from a deficit? Like if that's the case, as soon as we get down 14, you might as well just get back on the bus and go to the hotel. Like what are you talking about? I can't fathom an offensive coordinator in 2023 saying that to a reporter that we aren't built to come back. Like, of course you are. Every team has to have a way to come back. Like, I don't understand what you mean.
It's crazy. It's crazy, Shayne. But he might as well have added in there. We're also not built to
score
start the game
points
out strong or to score points for that matter, because they're not built to do that either. 12 points a game for the Steelers through 4 weeks. Offensively, if you take their 2 defensive scores away.
Have we even scored 70 total points yet, by the way?
No, they have.
I don't think we have.
Well, right? I mean, they've got 48 on offense.
Right.
And then they got the 2 defensive scores. So whatever my math 60, is after that plus 14.
I think like 62 or something like that. Yeah. So it's
So no, they have not matched the Dolphins' single game performance from week 3 where their starters played for 3 quarters. No, they have not done that.
Okay.
So it is unfortunate. We have to just laugh about it. If we're not going to laugh, we're going to cry.
Yeah,
so.
at this point, yeah.
All right. If you are a fan of the Pittsburgh Steelers and you would like to support the Steel Curtain podcast, please consider subscribing to the Steel Curtain podcast on YouTube. We appreciate all of your support. And as we said, Shayne and I will try to bring you 2 shows a week moving forward, including this live show that you can join us for every single Wednesday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern time. All right, Shayne, let's break down the Ravens and the Steelers game this week in the biggest things to watch for in week 5. Like I said already, pivotal game, because if the Steelers win, these teams are both 3-2. The Steelers will be in first place of the AFC North because they will hold the head-to-head tiebreaker at 3-2.
Yep.
If they lose, Shayne, now you're looking at a 4-1 Ravens team and a 2-3 Steelers team. You fall an additional game back. Essentially, it hurts you 2-game swing, losing this game to Baltimore. It is a very important game. I mean, they all are in the NFL. It's why football is the most superior sport, because every game matters. I mean, every game is like
more
a playoff
so than
game.
other.
You don't play 82 games or 162 in a season, and so you can't afford to drop several games in a row. And so it builds up the intensity for each game. The Ravens, as you can imagine, are favored in this game, even though the Steelers are at home. The Ravens are favored by 4 points. So if this were on a neutral field, Shayne, the Steelers would probably be 7-point underdogs in this game. That's just how Vegas works their lines there. They got a money line of plus 164 this week. The over-under set for just 38.5 points. They've envisioned a low-scoring game. We've seen a lot of those from the Steelers and Ravens. Is that a fair line for the Steelers this week at plus 4?
Oh, it's absolutely fair at this point. I mean, I would have been willing to give them a few more points if you were willing to do it. I think like the AFC North is weird, right? We know that like this game is probably going to be close just by default because it's how it goes. But like right now, do we really feel like we're in the same stratosphere as any of the top AFC teams? Like, is this it? It just feels like this is a game that could, if that 38.5, is over, it's probably because the Ravens score 30 of the points, right? Like that's kind of where it's at. And I hate to say this because we've done really well against Lamar Jackson and the Ravens in general for a long time. And something is different about it. And what it is mostly is a combination of how bad we're playing and how they have an actual offensive coordinator now that can scheme things up in the passing game. And I am just because we'll talk about matchups here in a little bit, but I just have to say for this part of this section here, I am terrified of Zay Flowers. Absolutely
Mm,
petrified of him being lined up against literally any corner on the roster outside of Joey. Like it's
mm.
not a good matchup, and he might be enough to swing that +4 by himself. Like it's just a serious matchup problem for us.
Yeah, I mean, he's a player that I have likened, and I caution using this because
Yes,
I think
yeah,
that as much as Antonio Brown makes me want to rip my hair out.
I know.
He was just the peak wide receiver when he was playing. He was on a
Yes,
Hall of Fame pace. I mean, it's still possible for him. But I think that Flowers has the movement skills like that, where you're just so savvy and
yes.
silky and smooth in your movements. You've got incredible field vision once you get the ball in your hands, and you can make that lightning jump cut back the other way without losing speed. And so he can be really dangerous. And he's not the type of cornerback, or excuse me, not the type of receiver that the Steelers cornerbacks want to see. He is a guy that can really, really hurt them in that way. And so they'll have to account for that. So let's start with that one first, Shayne, since we're talking about that already. So Steelers corners versus Zay Flowers. I think that Flowers has the ability to rip them up because they are not built to stop this guy. I mean, I think that the Steelers project best. I would have thought so. Who knows? Maybe they just suck against every receiver type because Nico Collins doesn't play like an amazing athlete. He's more like the kind of like more like Pickens, say that the big body possession type of receiver, not like the super quick twitched up guy. And he still ate them alive. I mean, we knew Devontae Adams was going to. He's going to get his. He's one of the best in the league. But Zay Flowers is that type of receiver, Shayne, where he can make a lot of things happen after the catch. And so you're going to have to stay up on him. You can't give him that big cushion, but he can also beat you over the top.
Yeah, when I was looking at the matchups to watch, and I knew he was going to be on here as one. Just all I could think is bad stuff, bad things. Do not like this
Yeah.
at all. It's just Levi Wallace is so different of an athlete than him at this point that it's comical.
Different is a good way to put that.
Yeah, I'll say different because I didn't want to be too mean to him, but I don't know if he can stay within 5 yards of him no matter where he lines up. I'll just be honest. Like, I don't think after 2 seconds that he'll ever be within 5 yards of Zay Flowers when he's man to man with him. I don't think it's possible. It's not even a situation of like, oh, Levi's just bad. Like, I don't think he physically can. Like, it doesn't matter how good or bad he is. I don't think he physically can stay with him. And I want to mention, he's not on here, but Nelson Aguilar had a big touchdown against us last year. He plays for this team. And our corners are worse. So don't disregard him either. He could just run by everybody on the secondary except for probably Minka. So, like, I just don't know with a competent passing game. And this, we can kind of get into the Steelers defense overall versus Lamar Jackson now because they've had a lot of success against him. I don't think we can assume that will continue with the way that this offense now runs.
No, I think you're going to have to assume that players are just going to be running free at times in this game because there's no evidence to suggest in these first 4 weeks, Shayne, that the coverage is going to get any better. I mean, you've got an old Patrick Peterson. We know about cornerback shelf life. I mean, I think he might have hit it, Shayne, unfortunately. I was hoping that he at least had one more year in the tank, and we'll see how he plays the rest of the way. But and honestly, I've got a lot more hope for a 33-and-a-half-year-old Patrick Peterson than I do for Levi Wallace, who's much younger than that, but just not a good athlete. And so it's mind-boggling that Porter gets 10 snaps last week and 58 on the season. And you're only using him in dime still. That's the only time he has seen the field is in dime packages. You're not even using him in nickel yet. Like, whatever happened to, we're going to have Porter out there at left cornerback and we're going to move
Patrick's
Peterson into the slot.
Move in
They haven't tried any of that. I mean, he's literally just a dime cornerback at this point. And he needs to be more than that. Like, it needs to start this week because Lamar has been good. Like, Lamar has, I mean, it's not surprising from a former MVP quarterback, but he's been good as a passer. And I think that he has the ability to just rip them to shreds this week. We know he can do it with his legs, and the Steelers have played him well in the past, Shayne. So if we delve into that one a little bit right now, Steelers defense versus Lamar, I mean, TJ Watt, I think, is the best player in the league at containing that guy. Like, he's just so smart that when Lamar's tried to get outside of him, he kind of just can see things a second before they happen. And obviously Watt is not as fast as Lamar, so he can't chase him down the open field, but he just contains him so well and stays disciplined there. And so I would hope that he can do that again this week against Morgan Moses. We'll see what happens. And I know that the Ravens are banged up too. I mean, they've got a
I
lot
mean,
of
they always are.
injuries.
So yeah, nothing new there.
So no, Steelers have played Lamar well in the past, but like you said, Shayne, I just don't know if that can continue when receivers are constantly getting 4 or 5 yards of separation at will against their cornerbacks. I mean, Lamar might not have to run this game, Shayne.
That's the key thing here is this is not the same offense. And I think the offense was more to blame for why Lamar didn't play well against us, more so than Lamar himself. Because I know as much as like Steelers fans hate to hear this, it's not like our defense was so much better than other defenses Lamar has played in his career. And like, it's more so that we understood like, okay, Greg Roman is who he is. We don't have to worry about these passing concepts beating us in the back end. They could contribute so many resources to just preventing Lamar from breaking the game that it limited them, right? And it wasn't like he was like always terrible against us or anything like that. But you also have to factor Mark Andrews like forgets how to play football against us for some reason, which, we could talk about that matchup. Like, he's always going to scare me because if he just doesn't play weirdly bad, he's going to be, unstoppable. But he does have something with the Steelers. I don't know what it is. He just has his bad moments.
Yeah.
So it's a bad matchup for us, but it's also like it hasn't affected us in the past. It might be different now with a new offensive coordinator, but it's just you look across this whole matchup, right? And like how many of these are we able to match up with them? Not very many, especially considering the injuries. You'd think there'd be more, but there's really not a lot of great matchups.
No, it's not. And you mentioned Andrews and how the Steelers have contained him in the past. Well, he's coming off a monster performance this past week too. And so it does make you wonder, can the Steelers keep that up against these two guys? I mean, those were Lamar as that star quarterback, and then Andrews is obviously his go-to receiver in just about every year. So they're going to have to be able to slow down that combination, obviously, if the Steelers want to have some sort of success there. Steelers offensive line against Ravens defensive line. Look, it doesn't matter which defensive line we're talking about anymore. And the Ravens got some big injuries on their defensive line.
They do.
We can basically just say Steelers offensive line versus whoever you want to say, and they're gonna have some difficulties. So. How do you think that matchup is going to go this week?
I mean, Clowney's on like an 80 pressure pace, amazingly this year for them, despite them having no other healthy edge rushers. It feels like, so you have to worry about him, which I didn't expect going into the season that we'd have to worry about him as a pass rusher specifically. But he's been getting it done with the Ravens, so you have to worry about him. Again, this team doesn't block anybody, so I can't give them the edge in any matchup until I see them block somebody. And I know we're going to sound like we're talking in a vacuum and we're just saying the same things over and over again, but they haven't proved us wrong, right? They have to prove that what we're saying about this team is wrong. And we say they can't block anybody. We say they can't cover anybody. Have they done either of those things through 4 games? Not really. So, show me something. I want to say that they could run on this team a little bit, but I don't think so until I see them block somebody.
Yeah, and I mean, we are talking about a Ravens team through almost a quarter of the season. They're allowing 14.5 points per game.
Yeah.
The Steelers score 12 offensive points per game. I mean, this is the third best scoring defense in the NFL. And I think that's a large reason why they've had success so far. So you've got to be able to get something going. That offensive line has to hold up. I mean, you're not, whether it's Trubisky or whoever's back there this week, if Pickett can't go, then you've got to be able to give that guy time, and the Steelers have to be able to put up points. I mean, I don't think that you can beat the Ravens with 16 points. I don't think that'll be enough to get it done. I think you're going to have to score in the 20s somewhere, Shayne. And that's, again, it's not the football that I like to play. You'd like to see the Steelers put up a 30-point game every once in a while, something that they do less often than any team in the league, it seems. But we need to start seeing that once more. And we said our last matchup here, Trubisky versus Ravens secondary. I'm assuming that Trubisky is playing this week, Shayne, but again, it's kind of some conflicting reports out there as of the time we're recording this on Wednesday. There are rumors swirling that Pickett might be able to suit up and play this week because of the bone bruise and if he's able to go and practice. So whoever's out there at quarterback for the Steelers, they've got to be careful with that Ravens secondary. I mean, Kyle Hamilton is there, had that pick this past week in Marlon Humphrey. And so they've got playmakers that can do things against them. We saw how just awful Dorian Thompson-Robinson looked this past week against the Ravens, and albeit his first game, because he had another guy with a really good preseason that
Yeah.
I mean, you play good defense like this, and that was a wake up call. So
It's tough, yeah. I think with whoever the quarterback is, right? I think the end all be all of it is before they can attack the secondary, they have to fight their offensive coordinator, right?
yeah.
So like realistically, they're first battling against themselves and their offensive coordinator,
Mhm.
and then they're battling against the secondary, right? Theoretically, I think that there's holes in the secondary you can exploit. Are we the team to do that? Probably not. So, I mean,
Mhm.
if it's going to take a Herculean effort by the receivers to make this a competent passing game against the Ravens, like that's just kind of what it's going to take. And Pickens, again, I'm hoping whoever it is that plays quarterback is just willing to throw him the football regardless of the situation
Yeah.
a little bit more. I want to see
Mhm.
them. I think one of the things that really gets me is it seems like these guys are not allowed to audible. A lot of people have talked about that.
Mhm.
Why why in this offense where both of the quarterbacks that you expect to possibly have to play have been in the system for minimum a year now, right? Why are they not allowed to audible? Why are they not allowed to
Mhm.
check out of bad plays? Like, is this actually the case? Do they just not do it? I don't really know, but it feels like if they were allowed to, that they would. And it's really I struggle with it because there's so many bad plays that they could check out of where like maybe you're checking into a also bad play but a less bad one, whatever,
Mhm.
right? Like I don't semantics at that point, but there's like the 4th and 1 call, right? I don't care if they took a timeout, talked about it for a while, put that call in. If I'm Kenny Pickett, I'm like, yeah, listen, I'm not doing this. Like I don't care if they take me out of the game after this. I'm not running this play on 4th and 1. Like I'm just,
Yeah.
it's stuff like that. Like Trubisky, especially if he's out there, we know he's just going to throw the check down every play if he can. We know he's not going to try to push the ball down the field because, and if he does throw it down the field, oftentimes it's not going to go well, right? Like that's just kind of the
Mhm.
book on him. I've said this for a little while now, going back to last year. I'd rather see Mason Rudolph play in this game if Pickett can't go, and it's not even because I think Rudolph is like a great player. Obviously, I think he's just willing to do more things than Trubisky is, and
Mhm.
he showed me a little bit of like more determination in the preseason, especially like he's willing to just take off and run despite not being a great athlete. Like I think he'd be a better player in this game. I'm just going to be honest with you. Now, would it mean that we win? No. Would we score maybe a few more points? Probably, honestly. But yeah, I'm just going to say that you have to fight
Mhm.
yourself first. So work on that, I guess.
Oh yeah, I mean you're certainly working against your own coaching staff here, which is never what you want. I mean you
Yeah.
want them to elevate your play, not the other way around. And unfortunately, I
Mhm.
think it has been the other way around. I think you can argue that on both sides of the ball. And you talked about not having the ability to check out a place. I mean that would explain why the Steelers are running into so many 9-man boxes and just.
Right.
But you don't have enough hats to block everybody. You're going to have 2
No.
free rushers, and they do it anyway because they think that they're that good. I don't know, or
I
you
don't
don't
know.
trust Kenny Pickett. I mean, I just don't
It's
understand
weird.
what the reasoning is for it. But all of that is concerning. Those are our matchups to watch this week. If you think of any others, please type them in the chat. We would love to hear who else that you think that the Steelers need to account for this week or vice versa. All right, we're going to give our keys to success here and then give our game predictions before we sign off for today. So let's start with the offensive side of the football. Shayne, what do the Steelers need to do, apart from the obvious, score points? What do they need to do specifically on offense to come away with a victory against the Baltimore Ravens in week 5?
Oh man. Find something, anything at all that works and stick with it. Because I think
Mm-hmm.
one of the issues with this offense is we've seen big plays, right? Like we talked about the 270-yard touchdowns that this team has in the passing game. We've seen Najee have a couple big runs. We've seen Jalen Warren have a couple big plays in the passing game and just being able to make plays in space. But they can't do 2 good things in a row. I guarantee if you
Yeah.
go after like outside of the touchdowns where like it's the next drive, it's not the next play. If you go look at probably all of our like 10+ yard plays that we have had this year and the next play after them, I have to imagine most of them are negative plays or close to that. It doesn't feel like they can do 2 things right in a row. And what I want to see them do is if they come out in this game and they start running the football and they're running the ball well, make them stop it. Like
Mm-hmm.
keep doing it until they stop it. And then as soon as they stop it, act like you're going to keep running with it anyway and throw something off of play action. Or if the passing game is getting going early, if you're in a 2nd and 4 situation and you just give a little handoff and let them try to take it up the seam, like something.
Mm-hmm.
Do something where we can rely on it throughout the game, right? Like try to find a rhythm in something that you do. I don't care if it's the deep passing game. I don't care if it's a short passing game, the run game, whatever. It doesn't matter what player it is we're going to. Find something and make them stop it. Because that's what I think is the problem is they'll find something in a game where it's working and then they don't stick with it because for whatever reason. And I understand like defenses are going to adjust, but make them. Like don't just assume they're going to adjust to it immediately. Do it until it doesn't work because you need to find something that works.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's a great key. Mine would be I think the Steelers need to run to set up the pass, utilize the play action, kind of like you were already talking about there. But I don't trust the situation in general. Obviously, I think that the Steelers will be a little bit outmatched this week. Their offense will be against a strong Ravens team. If Kenny Pickett does play, he's not going to be probably as mobile this week as he recovers from that bone bruise. If Trubisky plays this week, I just don't trust him in general. And so you need to be able to run the football effectively, and you need to be able to use play action off of the run game. You've got to keep the defense guessing a little bit, something that I think that Matt Canada is in a tier of his own at the bottom of the league.
Yeah, he's definitely the worst at that. 100%.
Your tells are always there. If Miles Boykin and Connor Hayward on the field, you are running the ball. If you're under 100%. Center, you're running 90% of the time. And so you can't have these tells anymore. Like if you see how some of these teams utilize the quick play action pass, like Dallas, Miami, where within like 2.5 seconds, that ball is play action and out with a slant over the middle of the field. Like you don't have to put your quarterback at risk doing play action, but it does keep the defense honest. It keeps them on their heels. They can't just go gung-ho one way or the other, because if they go all in on the pass rush, you're running the football, they can find a gap and squirt through. And so you have to keep them on their heels. And so I hope that they have a balanced approach this week. I don't think that you're going to be able to just go out there and sling it either. And so I think running, using play action to keep them on their toes would be my key on offense for the Steelers, especially knowing their shaky quarterback situation this week. Defensively, Shayne, what do the Steelers have to do to come away with a win?
Play Joey Porter 60 snaps and play Keanu Benton 45 snaps, play Desmond King 40 snaps. Put Patrick Peterson in the spot. Like literally just do everything differently than you've been doing, almost all of it. Because even the pass rush, like I can say the key is the pass rush, and it is. And like TJ destroys the Ravens in general, as far as I remember, like statistically. But I think that they more than ever know that, like, okay, we can just throw 3 guys at him and get the ball out quick with our new passing game, and we just don't have to worry about it that much. We can't expect this pass rush to get home the way that it normally does against this team. Like, we just can't expect it. So if we're not going to get that, you need to do something to give yourself a chance. And the only thing they can do is put guys in the field who are physically capable of staying with their receivers. And right now, if they trot out their normal starting defense, they don't have that ability. You cannot tell me that Levi Wallace is going to keep Nelson Aguilar even in check, or Zay Flowers especially in check. Like, he's not going to do it. I don't know how many more times we have to say that, how many more times the coaches have to see him get just turned around like he doesn't know where he's at, but he's not going to stay with these guys. And if the first play of the game is some double move or something to Zay Flowers down the sideline on Levi Wallace, I won't be surprised, because I think the Ravens want to know right away, can we get away with that stuff? The answer is probably yeah. So again, if they're not willing to do it this week against a team that clearly is just more talented than the guys we have out there, then it might just never happen, honestly.
Yeah, personnel changes are needed. I agree with that 100%. And I think that that's the biggest thing that they can do to implement change right away. The other thing that I would point out is I've been a big critic of Terrell Austin so far. I think that his
doesn't bring anything
defensively has been very bland. And it's so straightforward that other teams know. Like D'Amico Ryans knew exactly what the Steelers were doing last week, and they were able to completely nullify TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith. They chipped on those guys constantly, because Watt's going to be in the same spot every time. Highsmith's going to be in the same spot every time. You're running some variation of nickel every time. It seems like, for the most part. So, and the problem is, you can't get away with that anymore. This is a strategy game. I mean, you got to play it as such. You can't just say, well, we're going to man up with you, and we're going to be more talented than you, and we're going to win the football game. Because first of all, the Steelers, they're not more talented than a lot of teams out there, even with a couple of really good players on the roster. And secondly, you have to outthink the other coaches. You can't be outcoached so badly and expect to win. And so when you look at somebody like Nick Bosa, who flip-flops sides, Max Crosby's doing that more, Micah Parsons, Myles Garrett, these guys are lining up all over. They'll line up in the B gap. They'll do different things so that they can throw off the offensive coordinator and that they can have that strategy element to their game. The Steelers don't do that. I know you can't convince me otherwise. I know that Watt is not the most athletic in terms of just straight ability, like speed to the quarterback, 2 seconds. And he's not that type of guy. But you can't convince me that this guy on a Hall of Fame track is not good enough to go blow up a Kendrick Green at guard. Like we talked about last week, you have to be able to find creative ways to use him. As good as he is, and he can man up and win sometimes against double coverages as well, but don't make the job so easy for the offensive coordinator to account for. Flip him to the other side and say, oh, we're actually, we didn't account for that. We've got Highsmith double display and Watt's got the single rush against the left tackle, or now we got to flip the play and we're running on time on the play clock. Those kind of things, you can't make their job so easy. Right. The Steelers need to be more creative on defense. And I think if they show a little bit more creativity, whatever that means for them this point, I don't know what Austin has up his sleeve, but if they can show a bit more creativity, I think that could help out a little bit.
For sure.
All right. Let's give our game predictions, Shayne, for Steelers versus Ravens in week 5, and then we will sign off for today. So how do you see this game going? Are Steelers going to be in first place in the AFC North after Sunday?
Well, Tom, you know that on this podcast, we try our best to not be biased at all towards the Steelers, and I'm sure the last couple of them will tell you that is true. I don't see a scenario that is realistic enough for me to pick this team to win, even at home. Mm-hmm. I understand the AFC North is weird. We already did weird stuff with the Browns game that we got 2 defensive touchdowns. I don't expect that to happen again. It just feels like these teams are on different trajectories right now. And I think that near the end of the season, it could be a little bit different possibly. Mm-hmm. But right now, I don't see a realistic scenario for them to win. And I honestly think it's going to be kind of sad. And again, as far as the outcome, I have 27-13 Ravens. I don't trust this offense to score at all at this point, and I can't. And I think the defense just isn't built to stop this new Ravens scheme. I right now, if they're not going to play different players, which I know I said that's the key to success, but I don't think they're going to actually do it. I don't see them keeping them in check enough to even make it close. I just don't.
I can see it going that way. And it's not hard to imagine why. I mean, the Steelers, they've been blown out twice in 4 games. And this past game was from the Houston Texans. It's a younger team and a team that you should be able to at least be competitive with. And they couldn't do that, Shayne. So for that reason, I think this might be a bit more of a wake-up call game for them. Like, hey, everybody's talking about us right now. And if Mike Tomlin has that niche, I'm hoping he pulls it out right now, because the Steelers could really use that pep talk to get back on track right now. I don't think it's going to be enough for the Steelers to win the game. And so I have Baltimore beating the Steelers on their own turf with a score of 20-16. I've got a bit more low scoring game. I've got a closer game. I do think that the Steelers could make it close. Even if Trubisky is playing, I think that it's possible. The defense really takes a big step forward this week from the nightmare that we saw in week 4. But it's going to take a lot of things working together to even make a 4-point loss possible, Shayne, instead of a 2-score loss, like what you were thinking. So we're a little bit off on that. We both do have the Ravens losing. Shayne's got the Steelers certainly not covering there, and mine's right at that line. So one of those interesting bets this week. I think it can kind of go either way. Anything else you want to add, Shayne, before we sign off?
I mean, yeah, if you guys want to go watch what we really think about this team even more than we talked about today, just go watch the curtain call from yesterday. There should be a playlist in the YouTube. It'll really kind of bring home everything we've kind of talked about and why we're where we're at with this team. That's all I really want to add.
Absolutely, Shayne. And we're hoping that we don't want this, guys.
We don't want it to happen, but I'm not going to sit here.
We're just being honest. No, We're not gonna sit here and pretend that everything is all good and well when it's really not. The state of the franchise is kind of in disarray right now, and so it's possible for it to turn around. I think they need more than just these surface level changes, and so I think you agree with that as well, Shayne. But they're going to have to do more. But let's see what they can do this week. Maybe they'll come out and surprise us. But both of us do have the Ravens claiming this game and the Steelers falling in that AFC North race. All right, we go live on YouTube every single Wednesday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern time. Please come and join us. Thank you for joining us today on the show. You can follow Shayne on Twitter at Shayne Kubas. You can follow me on Twitter at Tommy Jaggi. You can download the Still Curtain podcast wherever you get your podcast. Also, check us out on YouTube or ask Alexa to play the Still Curtain podcast. And thanks for listening to the Still Curtain podcast.